Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cam Rogers Show. Fun fact, I am not Cam Rogers. I'm Harris Rubenstein, taking over for Cam while he takes a nice little vacation for this Memorial Day. Luckily, he's not going to be in Texas because it's going to be maybe 100 degrees this weekend. But that's besides the point. It was also 100 degrees in Houston last night as the Warriors took on the Rockets in Game 5. So let's take you to those highlights. It was an incredible game. We start with James Harden getting it going for us. Going to find Clint Capella underneath on the next one here. 8 points and 6 rebounds early for Clint Capella. Rockets up 4 in the first. 3 left to play in the first quarter. Dubs down 11. Draymond with the ball here. He's going to move toward the basket. He's going to miss, but Jordan Bell is going to slam this one home. Nice ups there by the Rook. Let's keep going. Second quarter, Rockets up 9. Harden with the rack attack. He was looking for the cut. He was looking great. Rockets up double digits. Here, David West to Steph Curry in the corner. Yes, please. Warriors cut the Rockets lead back to 9. 4 left to play in the half. Warriors down 8. Nice ball movement here on offense. And Clay from downtown. Yes, going to nail this one. Cut the lead to 5. But the Dubs aren't done. The Slim Reaper, Kevin Durant, takes it to go. Nails the 3. Dubs cut it to 5. And showing some life to end the half. Let's go to the third. Tie game, but not for long. Klay Thompson, nice little dream shake and 1 here. Warriors now up by 1, still in the third. Clay is coming alive in the second half. Going to nail a corner 3 from here. Put the Dubs back up by 1. Continue. Flash forward. Let's go to the, 6 minutes left in the third quarter. Steph and CP3 are having a great battle all game long. Little shimmy later there by Chris Paul. Let's jump to the fourth. Warriors down by 4. Steph Curry with it. Clay is going to nail one from beyond the arc. A nice answer. Only up by 1 now for the Rockets. CP3 getting in on the action here. J.J. Watt and Justin Timberlake love the crazy 3. They approve of that one. A close game here in the fourth. 6 left to play. Warriors with the ball, but Harden with the huge steal. And guess what he's going to do at the other end? He's going to throw it down to put the Rockets up by 6. What an incredible, incredible game for the Rockets and the Warriors. 98-94 as the Rockets take this one. Ladies and gentlemen, I sit here as a mortal, as an NBA basketball fan who likes to think I know what I'm talking about. The Golden State Warriors, as we stand right now, who I have deemed the greatest team ever assembled, face elimination in Game 6 on Saturday night after falling to the Rockets. They are now down 3-2 in the series and face their first elimination game since the 2016 NBA Finals in Game 7 when LeBron James blocked Andre Iguodala and brought the Cavs all the way back from a 3-1 deficit. But I must mention this, the second game in a row where the Warriors totally botched a last-second play. But the bigger question is, for Game 6, will Chris Paul play the game? Obviously, he had that huge hamstring injury at the end of the game. I don't know if he blew it out. It was just tight. It was just a cramp, but it did not look good. He wasn't overall that great in this game. He was only 6 of 19 from the field, but he's the closer on this Rockets team. When they need a big bucket, they go to Chris Paul. So it's going to be huge, huge, huge news for what ends up happening to Chris Paul in Game 6. Maybe they save him so he's 100% healthy for Game 7 if necessary. But whether or not Chris Paul plays is right now the biggest headline. But ladies and gentlemen, I cannot believe this. The Golden State Warriors might get eliminated by the Houston Rockets. Now, producer Lana Bond did remind me that obviously the Rockets were the #1 team in the entire NBA this year. Best record, #1 team in the West, best record in franchise history. But I never would have imagined that this would have even come close. I thought the Warriors were going to completely roast them. But as of right now, the Warriors face elimination on Saturday night against the Houston Rockets. Both teams from the finals last year, LeBron James and the Cavs and the Warriors, currently face elimination. LeBron and the Cavs obviously taking on the Celtics tonight in Cleveland to see if the Celtics can go back to the NBA Finals. All right, so that's it for our NBA highlights for today. Let's take you through what we have for the rest of the show today because I think we got a pretty good one on tap for you. So we're going to start, obviously, with our NFL headlines. Going to take you through everything going on with Donald Trump responding to the NFL's new Anthem policy. And then we're going to go through the top 5 overrated teams of the NFL season coming up. I'm sorry to all the teams and fans that I offend, but I'm also not sorry at all because your teams are wildly overrated. And then finally, we're going to go through the top 10 NBA players of all time, because there is never a bad time to do it, and it is always a fun list to go through. And then our final word today, we'll be going through the all NBA teams that were announced yesterday. If you're wondering what that is, it's obviously the first, second, and third teams that is voted on by the writers. So let's get into our first NFL headline, and we're going to start with President Trump responding to the NFL's new national anthem rule. He said, quote, "The NFL is doing the right thing," and specifically the owners did the right thing. He also mentioned in his announcement, that players who don't stand, quote, "maybe shouldn't be in the country." So an interesting quote there from President Trump. We've heard him say similar things like this in the past. Is obviously also coming off the report that we had breaking on NFL Daily on Wednesday that the owners are, quote, "effing terrified of President Trump," which, mind you, they should be terrified of him. I understand that, whether you agree with Donald Trump or not when it comes to this certain stuff, you should be terrified of him if you're a sports league. Any sports league should fear the president and his opinions on this. Obviously, he has a massive fan base. A lot of the quote-unquote flyover states that Donald Trump won are obviously some of the bigger NFL kind of fan bases, but if you're an NFL franchise and you're specifically an NFL owner, the last thing that you want is the President of the United States calling you out on Twitter, calling you out on a speech for having an opinion that you just don't agree on it with. Now, if you're an NFL player and you're coming out having a differing opinion with the president, it's a little bit different because you're a player and you're more of an employee. But for an NFL owner, there's only 32 of you, probably one of the richest people in the world. It is a very bad look to have such a public disagreement with the President of the United States. Obviously, also the power that he has over news cycles. Not a ton of power over NFL ratings. I need to point this out, that NFL ratings were actually up last year, and most of their primetime games dominated the most viewed shows of 2018. But still, I'd be afraid of Donald Trump if I was an NFL owner, so I can understand why they try to push this through. But I want to know from you guys, what are your thoughts on the new national anthem policy? For me, I think the policy, it makes sense coming from the NFL and what they have to worry about. From a player's perspective, one of the stupidest decisions you could possibly make to not go to the players' union to see what they think about this first. That was a terrible look on the NFL. Just chalk up another huge mistake that Roger Goodell and the NFL have made over the past couple of years. But for the most part, I find that we're going to have a much more interesting year in terms of what we're going to do with the anthem policy this year. I think it's going to do a lot of things overall for the NFL. I don't think it's going to improve or decrease ratings, but the players are going to respond to this in some sort of, I don't want to say an outburst, but they're going to react to this, whether it's all of them staying in the locker rooms, or maybe they do something on the field that's a little bit more outlandish than just kneeling. I think something is going to happen this year with the players that is really going to put this anthem policy back into the spotlight. It's going to be one of the top topics all year. I thought we had moved on from this, but the NFL just won't let it die. And speaking of not letting it die, Steve Kerr responded before the game last night saying, quote, "It's typical of the NFL." He also said it's idiotic. Now, Steve Kerr has been very outspoken on numerous political issues. He said that the NFL is playing to their fan base, which, look, I've agreed with Steve Kerr on topics in the past. I think that him being so outspoken on those political issues, like I said, it's good for the NBA. This is the head coach of the #1 team in basketball. You want him saying this kinds of stuff, especially with, the NBA having such an urban-based fan base. But I think his comments in the past, and especially stuff like this, have been, I almost want to say, viciously divisive. But that's been the political nature of 2018 in general. I think that Steve Kerr, with the stuff that he said in the past, he's obviously tried to emulate Greg Popovich with a lot of the stuff he said. So whether or not, obviously, Steve Kerr has an impact on the situation in general remains to be seen. But I just find that a lot of the stuff that we have Steve Kerr saying about the NFL over the past years, it just hasn't helped things. If anything, I think it's made stuff worse. It's made stuff more complicated, and it's divided a lot of the fan bases of someone who's an NBA fan and an NFL fan like I am. I find it difficult to find whose side do I go with, because I love Steve Kerr. He's a very intelligent guy and constantly has a lot of great points on stuff, but I also think that him saying that the NFL is playing to their fan base, well, I mean, of course they are. They have to. If the majority of their fan base doesn't like what the players are doing, then obviously the NFL needs to respond to the need to do something about it. So I don't think criticizing them for playing to their fan base is the right way to go. I think criticizing them for the physical rule is the problem here, but I think Steve Kerr's message, like it usually does, is getting a little bit mixed up in hyperbole rather than legitimate facts. And that's just something I think we've seen when we've had NBA people comment on stuff going on with the NFL. But I will say this, and this is something that came out yesterday, and this will bring us to our next headline. I don't know how the NFL continues to mess up so many pivotal parts of huge rule changes, and we got another big report yesterday that the NFL did not hold a vote for the new national anthem policy. Apparently the league owners, quote unquote, polled owners, but they didn't hold an official tally, and then we had Roger Goodell saying that the vote was unanimous. So they didn't hold a vote, but it was unanimous. I mean, did they have the owners fill out a survey monkey or something? Like, how do you get that it was a unanimous vote if you didn't actually hold a vote and then also let this get public? Now, I will say this, obviously, to support that there are two sides of this story. Ian Rappaport says that there was an official vote held. Now, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Ian Rappaport works for the NFL. Ian Rappaport is an employee of the NFL Network. So they are going to use him as a mouthpiece to deliver whatever information they want to put out there. So the real report that came out from Seth Wickersham yesterday is that they did not hold an official vote, which again, very, very atypical for a major resolution. That is not what we have seen from sports leagues in the past. This seems like something that you need to have all the owners sit down and decide, not just send out a memo and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? We want to find out, haha, casual. It's going to kind of decide a lot of the headlines for the NFL season, but, you know, a casual little tally. I just don't understand how the NFL, not even with just something like this, consecutively over the past 5 to 10 years has just messed up every single possible big decision that you could, between Deflategate and Ezekiel Elliott, and now the stuff with the Anthem and everything going on with domestic violence and opioids, with marijuana. Like, every single time they have an opportunity to push the league forward and really try to do some legitimate reform that would help the league with their players and their future, concussions especially, they just don't. They do the complete opposite thing of what they would need to do in order to make the situation better. It's frustrating as an NFL fan. I think they're losing fans by consistently messing things up like this. And it goes back to my original point. They have the opportunity here to do the right thing. Maybe the right thing isn't saying, oh, if you kneel, you're going to get fined. I think a good idea is that if you don't want to stand up for the anthem, you stay in the locker room. But the wrong way is to punish players for expressing their First Amendment rights. Now, obviously, these players are private employees, and the NFL is their employer, and they can fire them if they deem their actions to be negative towards the league. But finding a player for enacting their First Amendment rights is going to be very shaky, and it's going to raise a lot of question marks as to what the NFL values in terms of its overall policies. But again, they didn't vote for this. Rappaport says they do. Take it either way you want. But again, Ian Rappaport is always going to side with the NFL. They sign his paycheck. Let's get to our next headline here. Apparently, the NFL sought the public opinion on Kaepernick. They commissioned an official poll back in 2017. The goal was to see if people thought that Colin Kaepernick should have been signed. We don't know if that data was sent to other NFL teams, but we know that Roger Goodell and other high-ranking officials with the NFL do have it. But this isn't very surprising to me. I don't think people need to freak out about this. Leagues do this all the time behind closed doors. They will constantly find polls, do kind of a little bit of public testing to see how new rule changes would work, or to just get the public opinion on certain things. I know the NBA has done this in the past with certain political issues. I'm sure the NFL has done this in the past as well to kind of gauge where they are in the court of public opinion. This is also how teams find out what fan bases want. You'll see this a lot, that they'll poll season ticket holders to kind of see what they want, the direction of the team. Now, this isn't always stuff that has to do with political issues. Sometimes it may just be, do you want us to decrease hot dog prices by $3 next year? But this is obviously a little bit more serious of a poll. Again, we do not have what that data ended up showing, but we do know that the NFL has seen it and probably interpreted some sort of rule change off of this. I still think that they did a secret poll with their fan base about the anthem stuff, and then made the rule based off of it. But again, that's conjecture. I do not have an official report behind that. But let me know in the comments section if you think a team should sign Colin Kaepernick. I don't know, honestly, anymore, because at this point we're so far removed from him actually being a legitimate football player. I think he should still get signed just to get a chance in camp, but I think the argument was last year, Colin Kaepernick deserves a chance to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think that opportunity is gone. I just don't think you can legitimately give him a chance at a starting quarterback job. Also because most teams in the NFL right now have a legitimate idea of who they want to be their starter, or have a couple different options like the Jets or even the Broncos having a little bit of a quarterback battle. But I think a team should, but the farther and farther we get from Colin Kaepernick having been on an NFL field, the farther and farther we get from him actually having a chance of being signed. All right, let's get to our next headline here. We'll update you on what's going on with Reuben Foster quickly. Obviously, on Wednesday, he was found not guilty of domestic violence after the victim openly lied under oath during the trial, constantly claiming that Reuben Foster hit her multiple times, which was just a flat-out lie, which I can't believe, A, was even possibly defended or not figured out beforehand. B, the DA that was covering the case still claims that Reuben Foster did this by saying that we can't believe anything the victim said because she's such a big liar, which apparently, according to the DA of the county, means that Reuben Foster is still guilty. Just ridiculous. And again, this is my issue with a lot of stuff that's been going on with the domestic violence stuff. Obviously, domestic violence is not good. It is something that you want to weed out of the NFL as quickly as you possibly can. But one thing that I've had a big issue with, doesn't matter if the report is true or not. You instantly lose the court of public opinion as soon as one of these reports come out, whether it's true or false. Not a lot of people keep up with the outcomes of these trials. Usually they see the headline, Reuben Foster accused of domestic violence. As soon as they see that headline, they instantly assume that he's guilty, want him suspended, or want him out of the NFL. I would love to know the amount of people who saw the initial headline that Reuben Foster was accused that actually know what happened in the case and how badly the victim lied. I would love to see a poll on that. I think that'd be a little bit more of an interesting poll than seeing if fans think that Colin Kaepernick should be signed. But that's just me. I've been also annoyed that on Twitter, the reaction to the victim lying straight up in court was not anything near what the reaction was to when Reuben Foster was initially accused. Now, I understand that Reuben Foster is a famous NFL player. He's a big-time name, and this woman, I'm not saying she's a complete nobody, but she's obviously not an NFL player, and nobody really knows her name. But it constantly proves my point that innocent until proven guilty, at least when it comes to athletes, is dead and has been dead for a very long time now, almost a half decade. So we got to get back to a point where these guys are not instantly assumed guilty before there's an actual trial. Because as we've seen here, lying does happen. Some people do legitimately want to ruin these guys' lives. So please, wait until the full story comes out and don't just assume that everyone is guilty. Once a guy is found guilty, boom, go ahead, rip them to pieces. But please, be patient and be responsible with these news reports. Not everything that you see on the internet is true. All right, let's get to our next headline. Rob Gronkowski and the New England Patriots are indeed nearing an extension. According to Jeff Howe of The Athletic Boston, it is quote-unquote likely that Rob Gronkowski will play in 2018 under new terms. He is currently set to make up to $9 million in 2018. He made over $10.2 million last season, which was =1 money for tight ends in the NFL. If you watch me on the Patriots Report, I've been saying this all offseason. People thought that the retirement was because maybe, he got injured or him and Bill Belichick weren't getting along. No, this entire thing has been about money. Since the beginning, Gronk has always wanted an extension. Just like LeBron James, he has constantly wanted to be paid as the #1 player at his position. As of right now, with the contract he currently stands to make, he would be the number 2 paid tight end in football. He doesn't like that. His agent doesn't like that. And they've decided that until Gronkowski gets an extension, he's not going to show up to OTAs. This has been about money the entire time. And I think that the Patriots have known this. They've been working towards an extension. Everything that we've heard is that the Patriots are okay kind of doing what they did last year, where they turned a lot of money that he wasn't initially going to have and made it incentive-based. I mean, he made almost $3.5 million this year by making first-team All-Pro for the NFL at the tight end position. So expect something very similar this year in terms of the Rob Gronkowski extension. He made $10.2 million last year, like I said. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes somewhere close to $10.5 million this year to kind of just give him a little bit of an accelerator. They're going to do this every single year for Rob Gronkowski until the year that he retires. He's always going to have those incentive-based contracts. He's always going to get paid off of how many games he plays and the stats that he put up. But I want to know from you guys, will the Patriots return to the Super Bowl in 2018? Now, the homer in me says definitely, and throwing up a heart. But trust me, there's nothing more difficult than making it back to the Super Bowl 3 consecutive times. So I don't know how they did it twice. I certainly will be stunned if they're able to do it 3 times in a row. They're obviously bringing back most of the same roster they did last year. So we'll see what ends up happening with the Patriots this year. But that Rob Gronkowski extension is going to be huge. We got a comment from Miller Rutherford, saying, no, the Pats dynasty is over. Well, if you watch the Cam Rogers show, it is not over. It's actually crumbling. So, over, not quite yet. It's on its way down. So we'll see what happens with the Pats dynasty, whether or not it's blowing up from the inside out. I still think we got 2 years left. As long as Tom Brady's playing the New England Patriots, the dynasty isn't over. As long as Brady's playing on the Pats, they will be the favorite in the AFC every single year. So I'm sorry, Miller. It's not over quite yet. You still got a couple years to go. You'll see my overrated teams, though, later, as the who in the AFC will not be dethroning the Patriots. Let's get into our next headline. Mercedes Lewis is joining the Packers. He signed a 1-year deal. We'll just kind of roll through this quickly. Be a fun tight end pair between him and Jimmy Graham. We know that Lewis played with the Jaguars for 12 seasons. Good tight end. He'll end up being their number 2. I don't really see him making a massive impact on the Packers offense in general, but it's a good signing, safe signing. We'll give them a nice backup if Jimmy Graham ends up getting injured. But for now, a big upgrade at the tight end core for the Green Bay Packers going into this year with Mercedes Lewis and Jimmy Graham. All right, our next headline. Ryan Tannehill is going to wear a brace on his knee. He has officially returned to the field for OTAs. He isn't wearing a brace right now because obviously a lot of the drills they are doing are non-contact, but he will during the season and during minicamp once they throw on pads and start hitting each other. As we know, Tannehill, he missed the end of 2016 and then all of 2017 with separate left knee injuries. He tore his ACL during camp last year, missed the whole year. Big shame. I thought last year was going to be a huge year for Ryan Tannehill, but now this is the huge season for him. I understand that he already has the contract, but this is the make or break season with the Dolphins despite the record. He needs to have a great individual season to be their quarterback of the future. It's time to put up or shut up for Ryan Tannehill. There are no more excuses. Their weapons on offense are good enough for him to succeed. I understand that the team in general isn't going to get a lot of wins, but if you're Ryan Tannehill, this is your time. A weak team, you're coming off of an injury, it's your offense now, you're the face of the franchise. You need to come in and win some games for this franchise and really cement yourself as the quarterback of the future. So we'll see what Ryan Tannehill is able to do today. Let's get to it easily. The funniest story of the week. Terrence Williams says that Kendall Wright crashed his car. Now, Terrence Williams has claimed that he wasn't driving. He told police that, quote, my friend was an effing idiot. Now, Terrence Williams and Kendall Wright go way back. They went to Baylor together. But here's where things get a little bit fishy. So apparently, Terrence Williams says that Kendall Wright called him after he crashed the car. But that doesn't really make a lot of sense because as the police brought up, Terrence Williams' phone was in the car. So how exactly would Kendall Wright have called Terrence Williams if Terrence Williams didn't end up having his phone? Now, Terrence Williams did say a lot of the things to police saying, quote, that's my $325,000 car that I paid for. I know that I can't drive a car. He was very obviously intoxicated during this whole scenario. He did also say after the phone thing, quote, "I'm not trying to lie to you. I swear to God, I would not try to lie to you." Well, Terrence, I regret to inform you that I don't know how Kendall Wright would have called you and you have answered if your phone was in the car that he apparently called you from. This whole situation is just a massive, massive crap show because now we have his lawyer coming out saying that, oh, Terrence Williams did not hit a light pole, yet in all the photos it's very obvious that he hit a light pole. Now his lawyer is saying that he doesn't remember anything because he hit his head. Oh, Terrence, what are we going to do with you? This is such a wild story. The videos of him falling off of his motorbike when he was going back to his car is just hilarious. Please go watch the Cowboys Report from yesterday with Tom Downey. It was a magical, magical, hilarious show that I was giggling the whole time. Terrence Williams, you've provided me so much entertainment for the next couple of days. I thank you for this. We want to know from you guys. Give me a reaction. Who do you guys think is the Dallas Cowboys' #1 wide receiver? Give me a like for Allen Hurns, a laughing face for Michael Gallup, a heart for Terrence Williams, or a wow face for Cole Beasley. All right, let's get into our next NFL headline. A quick one. Again, the Eagles have signed linebacker Kyle Wilson. He tried out for the team during the recent rookie minicamp. Big-time need for the Eagles at linebacker, seeing as Paul Warrillow tore his ACL and they released Michael Kendrick for cap reasons. He did go undrafted in April, but 173 tackles in the last 2 years at Arkansas State for Kyle Wilson. A good player, not an amazing player. I think he's an okay prospect, but I don't think he starts. It'll be interesting to see what Kyle Wilson does in terms of an overall impact, but I wouldn't get your hopes up if you think Kyle Wilson's going to be a major part of the Eagles' defense. The Michael Kendrick release was actually a surprise, but look, Harry Roseman, cap genius, one of the best GMs in football. I'm going to take his word over my own. I think Michael Kendricks is a good player, but they actually freed up close to $6 million in cap space by releasing him this year. Sounds like a good move to me. All right, let's get to our next one. Jake Butt says, quote, "This is the strongest I've ever been." So if you're wondering who Jake Butt is, this is the tight end from Michigan who tore his ACL during the Citrus Bowl right before the 2017 draft. Now, that was Jake Butt's second ACL tear since 2014. He does say, quote, "I feel great. My knee feels great." Look, Jake Butt, in my opinion, was going to be a late first, early second round pick if he didn't end up getting injured. He's a very good player. I think he's going to make an impact with the Broncos offense this year. They don't really have a tight end right now who is really going to light the world on fire. Obviously, Julius Thomas is gone. Virgil Green left this offseason as well. So it really is open for Jake Butt to make an impact on this offense. We saw the relationship that Case Keenum had with Kyle Rudolph last year in Minnesota. I think that Jake Butt and Keenum can have a very similar relationship this year in Denver. All right, our next headline, Zay Jones undergoes surgery. He will miss the rest of the team spring practices. The injury isn't expected to jeopardize his season, but he is expected to start opposite Kelvin Benjamin this year at the #2 wide receiver spot for Zay Jones. A very weird offseason for Zay Jones. He was arrested in LA on felony vandalism. There was also a video that came out with TMZ of him naked in a hotel hallway arguing with his brother Caleb Jones, another NFL player. Look, I'm not going to speculate, but that video reminded me of the story of when Chandler Jones, he was on the Patriots at the time. He had a bad reaction of smoking synthetic weed, or as it's known as spice. He took his shirt off, went to a police station, got on his hands and knees, and prayed for their forgiveness. So that was a very interesting story, and now seeing something similar to this in Zay Jones running around a hotel hallway naked, it just seems to be an interesting parallel. But again, speculation, nothing behind that. But we will see what Zay Jones is able to do. He will be fine for the start of the season. All right, let's get into Kevin White, our last NFL headline for today. Kevin White says that he believes in himself, saying, quote, "I'm motivated every single day with or without the option," obviously referring to the fifth-year option that the Bears declined, which isn't a huge surprise, seeing as Kevin White has only played 5 games since being drafted 7th overall in 2015. I would decline his option too. He literally has not played half of an NFL season yet in 3 years. I've never seen anything like this. The only player that I've seen play less games in this amount of time was Justin Blackmon, and that had nothing to do with injuries. That had everything to do with him having a massive drug issue and then literally vanishing off the face of the earth. Vanishing. Justin Blackmon, we still have no idea where he is. So now we have Kevin White, who was supposed to be one of the best wide receivers in football, or at least one of the best wide receivers to come out of the draft in a while. He's been a massive disappointment. They signed Allen Robinson, so we'll see what ends up happening overall with Kevin White this season. But for now, we are going to just hopefully he can actually play some games this season. But the Cam Rogers Show today is brought to you by Autolist. Are you looking for a used or new car? Tired of browsing a million sites? Go to Autolist.com to browse the largest source of inventory on the web, or you can download their top-rated mobile app for iPhone or Android. I'm actually using Autolist right now to buy a car because my mom's old car that I was supposed to get broke and is way too expensive to fix. So instead, I'm going to get myself a nice car on Autolist.com. It's been such an easy process so far. I think you guys will enjoy it as well. Again, head to Autolist.com or even download their mobile app on iPhone or Android. So we just went through the top NFL headlines of the day. Now is when I get everyone pissed off at me, which I'm ready for. I am ready for everyone to be angry at me. We are going to go through the top 5 overrated teams for 2018. So let me take you through my criteria first. So A, it's a team that is due for regression this year. What does regression mean? A team that was great last year, but due to multiple different factors, maybe a harder schedule or roster holes, something of the above, they're going to regress in 2018. B, a team who has more than reported roster holes. So maybe a team that you hear a lot of people hyping up that maybe just doesn't have a lot behind it for whatever reason, and people seem to think that they're going to be incredible this year. I'm going to poke a couple holes in that. C, a team with multiple overrated players. You'll pretty easily know what team I'm talking about there. And then D, a team whose division improved. Now, you might think that's a very specific criteria, but you have to remember, if you dominated your division and had, X amount of wins, and that gave you 5 more wins on the season, and then all of a sudden your division got better, you're going to lose 2 to 3 wins, and that might kick you out of playoff contention. So beware of that as we go through these teams. All right, let's get to our number 1 overrated team for 2018. Oh, man. People in the AFC are going to be so mad at me. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the number 1 most overrated team for 2018. Why? Well, the last time I checked, Blake Bortles is still the starting quarterback. Now, the defense is going to be great again this year. There's no doubt in my mind that Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Boye and Calais Campbell, they're going to dominate. They're going to perform very well. The defense is again going to be one of the best units in the entire NFL. But that offense, to me, is not convincing at all. That passing attack should still be one of the worst in the entire NFL. So you combine a bad passing attack. I think the offensive line is still a big question mark besides bringing in Andrew Norwell. He's a good guard, but one guard does not make an entire offensive line. I think they still have issues at the tackle position. I think the other guard is also an issue. So, look, their wide receiver core as well is questionable. They signed Dante Moncrief to a ridiculous contract. They let Allen Robinson go. They have Austin Seferian-Jenkins at tight end now, but they don't have anyone behind him. I'm not convinced with the Jaguars quite yet. To me, they remind me of the Atlanta Falcons, who made it all the way to the Super Bowl and then had a massive regression year just because the team had a lot more roster holes in general, and that momentum that you can build as a team who isn't successful very often then has that huge year. For me, I think it's going to lead to a big-time regression for them. Also, the AFC South in general got better. If Andrew Luck comes back, Deshaun Watson's coming back, the Titans got better. The AFC South in general is going to be harder for the Jaguars to move through. And as well, they have a big-time matchup this year against both the Patriots and the Steelers and the Eagles and the Cowboys and the Giants. So they have a lot of tough games on the schedule this year, way, way harder than the last place schedule they played last year. So the Jaguars, my number 1 overrated team for 2018. All right, let's get to number 2. This is one I think that a lot of people can agree with me with. It's the Carolina Panthers. Now, they're good front 7. I think with Luke Kuechly coming back this year, we'll see what happens with Thomas Davis after his suspension is over. But I think that they lost a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball. They lost Kurt Coleman. Their secondary is an absolute mess right now. They've not been able to get anyone to replace Josh Norman over the past couple of years. They do not have a top-ranked corner that I think can shut down the likes of a Julio Jones or a Michael Thomas, or now obviously still talking about the NFC South, Mike Evans as well, Deshaun Jackson. I just don't think they have the guys in the secondary that can keep up with the rest of the NFC. So now for a big reason, it falls on the offense, and especially that running game, to work out the clock, to make sure that they can keep the ball out of the opposing team's hands. But look, that running back core to me is still very questionable. Who's running the ball between the tackles? You have Christian McCaffrey, you have C.J. Anderson. I'm not a huge fan of either of them in terms of running the ball. I think that they're electric out of the backfield on screen passes and running the ball on the outside, but I just think that with the way the NFC is kind of in trending over the past couple of years, you got to be able to run the ball between the tackles and get those tough yards. And I just wonder if the Panthers have the personnel on offense to be able to do that. They lost Andrew Norwell, so I think the interior of that offensive line is questionable as well. Matt Khalil is still somehow the left tackle, which I don't even know why they gave him that contract in the first place. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Panthers this year, but 11 wins just does not seem likely for the Panthers in 2018. All right, let's get to number 3, and I've been banging this drum since the day the season ended, and people have been telling me that this is a comeback year for them. The Green Bay Packers are without question one of the most overrated teams in all of football going into 2018. Oh, but Harris, they got Jimmy Graham, and Aaron Rodgers is coming back from injury. The offense was never the problem in the first place. The problem was that their defense is still a complete and utter disaster. This was one of the worst pass rushes in all of football last year. Unequivocally one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL. Guess what the Packers didn't do this offseason? They didn't add pass rush. And it got so bad that Clay Matthews, during his first interview at OTAs, commented on how strange it was that the Packers didn't add pass rush this offseason. Now, I also look at the secondary. I like Jair Alexander, who they drafted. I like Josh Jackson as well. But I have a question. Who's covering Adam Thielen? Who's covering Allen Robinson, now in the Chicago Bears? Who's covering Golden Tate? Who is the number 1 corner on this team? Kevin King? We saw him get roasted multiple times last year. I think this Packers defense is going to get them killed this year. The Bears upgraded on offense. The Vikings added Kirk Cousins. Like I said, the Bears, the Lions are coming back with a good offense this year and a better running game. I think the Packers are going to be a great offense this year. I'm excited to see what Aaron Rodgers does with Jimmy Graham and now with Mercedes Lewis, but I am not at all confident in that defense. I think it is going to be the death of them. I don't even think the Packers end up making the playoffs this year. I think the NFC is stacked, and I think it's difficult to actually put them in the top 6. You can make an argument that they're not even the second best team in their division. And if you look at the conference in general, we could have 2 teams from the NFC South go. There are 3 possible playoff teams in the NFC West. There's 3 possible playoff teams in the NFC East as well. Where do the Packers fit in? I think they have a much more difficult path to get to the playoffs than people think, even with Aaron Rodgers. I think quarterback is the most important position in football, but the NFC is stacked with great offenses this year, and the Packers, I just don't think, have the defense to keep up. All right, let's continue to move on here with my overrated teams. Let's go to number 4, and it's the Houston Texans. Now, I was looking through Super Bowl odds the other day, and it kind of stunned me when I was looking through them, and that's also based off of what some of these overall rankings are based off of. And I was stunned to see that the Houston Texans, a team that went 4-12 last year, who have a quarterback coming off of a torn ACL last year, a team that doesn't have an offensive line, a team that has a shaky secondary and has multiple star players coming back from injury, 18-1 Super Bowl odds this year. The Houston Texans, who went 4-12 last year. I have no idea why people think that this team is going to be so good. I like Deshaun Watson. I think he's a fun quarterback, but he's also coming off another ACL tear. This isn't the first ACL tear of his career. He's had 3 in his football career. 3 ACL tears. That linebacker core is a huge issue. Brian Cushing is gone, though he's obviously not a factor anymore, seeing as the dude can't stop taking steroids. The offensive line is still a huge issue. I think the secondary is very shaky. I don't really see the appeal of this Texans team. I don't like their running game. I think Lamar Miller is 3.5 yards in a cloud of dust. D'Onta Foreman, I don't know if he has the chops to be an NFL running back. This is a classic overhyped football team because of the quarterback. Deshaun Watson had some fun games last year. Fun games. Totally can admit that. But that doesn't all of a sudden mean they're going to come into this year and be a playoff team. They're in a tough division, and they got to be able to find a way to not just can't give up so many yards through the air. So the Texans, number 4 on my list for overrated teams. I would be stunned if they go 500 this year. They're in a really, really tough division with a very, very just top-heavy roster. All right, let's go to my last overrated team. And this one, I think people can kind of, how do I put this? I think they can agree with me because this team is going through a big-time transition in terms of one quarterback to another. The defense is going from a big transition from one generation of defensive players to the next generation of defensive players. And yet somehow the Kansas City Chiefs are also 18-1 to win the Super Bowl next year, the same as the Houston Texans. Now, I like Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be a monster at quarterback in the NFL. But we can't really deny that the Chiefs are losing a veteran quarterback in Alex Smith, and there's not just going to be that there's going to be a natural kind of downtick from Alex Smith to a rookie quarterback. Like there has to be. Alex Smith had a great year last year, despite all of my opinions against him. He had a great year last year. You're switching to a rookie quarterback. They trade Marcus Peters. The rest of the secondary is weak. They got rid of Derek Johnson, so the linebacker core has some questions. And I think it's also fair to ask a question about Kareem Hunt. He had a really bad end of the year last year. He hit a massive wall. Now we go into his sophomore year. Could we see a sophomore slump for Kareem Hunt? I think it's likely that we see him take a little bit of a downtick statistically from last year, especially with a new passing attack. I think they overpaid massively for Sammy Watkins, but Sammy Watkins plus Tyreek Hill is going to be a lot of fun. But the Chiefs are one of my top overrated teams for 2018. Let's take you through that top 5 one more time before we get to our next segment. At number 1, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 2, it's the Carolina Panthers. Number 3, the Green Bay Packers. Number 4, the Houston Texans. And number 5, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, let's get into our next segment. But before that, a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by Autolist. Driving a car is fun. Car shopping should be fun as well. Go to Autolist.com or download their top-rated app for iPhone or Android today. All right, I've been waiting to do this segment for a long time, and I think it holds a very special place in a lot of NBA analysts' heart, what their top 10 NBA players of all time list is and how they rank certain players. So I'm going to give you guys my list today. It's been negotiated through the Chat Sports offices as well to make sure that I'm not completely out of my mind. But before we get into my list, I kind of want to share my criteria for how exactly we rank these players and how, which kind of sections of players' careers I held in higher regard than others. So the first one that we kind of have to obviously rank, the number 1 is individual accolades. So what you were able to do during your NBA career, kind of your overall stats, your career outputs, the amount of MVPs you won, final MVPs, all-star games, first-team All-NBAs. This stuff matters. It represents your individual performance versus the other players in the NBA. The second one, championships. I personally think that championships are, in sports, the most important thing overall for a player's career, but obviously you can you can overcome lack of championships with a lot of individual accolades. Number 3, your impact on the NBA as a whole. What do I mean by that? What is your legacy in basketball? Did you change the game forever? Do people remember you in the game? Have you changed it? Do people model their games after you? Where do you stand in terms of the legacy of the NBA? I think is a huge one. And then also number 4, what era did you play in? Obviously, I think that takes a lot of things into consideration. It explains why, as you'll see with our list, we can't really have a Bill Russell over a Tim Duncan despite all of his championships. just to be frank, Bill Russell just didn't play during a time that was overly competitive in terms of basketball. Obviously, he took on Wilt Chamberlain and those great Laker teams, but Tim Duncan obviously had a lot more competition to go up against. All right, let's get to our number 10 player of all time. And I got to say, people, number 10, I think, is maybe the most difficult one to come up with because there's 5 to 6 different players that you can have at your number 10. But for me, it's Kobe Bean Bryant. 25 points per game. Just one of the best shooters in NBA history, 5 championships, won an MVP back in 2008, a 2-time finals MVP, made it to 18 All-Star games. That's second all-time behind Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But I think despite his controversy, you can't argue the dominance that Kobe Bryant had over the NBA. He is also the player that, if you ask the new era of players, hey, who do you base your game off of? They asked Jason Tatum during Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. He said Kobe Bryant. Donovan Mitchell has said Kobe Bryant in the past. Markelle Fultz said Kobe Bryant as well. So many young players look at Kobe Bryant as the guy to base their games around. His aggressiveness, his competitiveness, his overall style, and just his passion for the game, I think, was infectious for a lot of people, or a lot of young athletes looking to get into basketball. Kobe Bryant was the guy that people got addicted to basketball over, including myself. Kobe Bryant made me fall in love with basketball almost instantly. I started watching basketball at a very young age. I'm talking single digits here, 5, 6, 7. I watched Kobe Bryant and those Lakers teams win 3 finals in a row. I watched how incredible that he was with Pau Gasol taking down the Big 3 Celtics. That war that the Celtics and him had was just, it was incredible for the middle part of Kobe's career. Obviously, the end of it was riddled with injuries and the awful, awful Dwight Howard mood, which I can never forgive the Lakers for doing. Whoever thought that putting Kobe Bryant and Dwight Howard on the same team needs to be just forever criticized. I don't know how anyone thought that was ever going to work out. But for me, at number 10, you can choose David Robinson. You can choose Oscar Robertson, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dr. J. There are so many options at number 10. So I don't know what you guys think. Who do you think should be number 10 on the all-time NBA players list? We have Kobe Bryant, but I don't know from you guys who you think should be at number 10. All right, let's get to number 9 here. This one, I think with number 9 through number 1, we know who these players are. It's simply a matter of who do you have them ranked personally. At number 9, I have Shaq. I think a lot of the time people think of Shaq as just kind of what they see on NBA on TNT. This lazy, kind of lackadaisical, fun, goofy dude who is more concerned about his image rather than what he shows on the court. Well, that's not true at all, because Shaquille O'Neal during his prime and also when he was in Orlando was possibly the most unstoppable physical force in the history of basketball. He won the scoring title twice as a center in the 90s and 2000s, which is absolutely wild considering who else was playing in the NBA during the time. He was always a character, but we're never going to see anything like Shaquille O'Neal ever again. I think, just again, like I said, people forget what Shaq was like at his peak. He was completely unguardable down low, and the quickness that he had at his size was just, it was mind-boggling the way that this guy was able to move at 300 pounds. It was crazy what Shaq was able to do against legitimate athletes in the NBA. Completely dominated them, pushed them over like they were paper. He is a special, special player. If we ever see anyone like Shaq again, I will be stunned. I don't even think it's physically possible to create another human being like Shaquille O'Neal. I don't know where he came from. Maybe he was dropped from a spaceship or something, but we will never see another Shaquille O'Neal again, and that's why he is on number 9 on our list. All right, let's get to number 8. This is Larry Bird. And I think a lot of times with Larry Bird, people overlook him a lot and his greatness in the NBA. This was not just another shooter who was, who was good off the ball. He was a nice shooter, won some championships. Larry Bird was a ruthless, clutch shooter. Just the amount of times that he would destroy teams' dreams in the fourth quarter was astonishing to me. Whether it was the Lakers in the finals, whether it was the Hawks in the East, the multiple times they took on each other in the Eastern Conference playoffs with Dominique Wilkins. Larry Bird destroyed people's souls while he played in the NBA. He's one of the most vicious trash talkers of all time, and it is a shame that back injuries ended his career prematurely. He's one of the great players all time, not even just in the history of basketball, just one of the most interesting athletes in the history of sports. He wasn't an incredible athlete, but his fundamental skills and his technical skills were so far and away better than anyone else playing at the time that he would just dominate anyone who wasn't able to defend him with fantastic fundamentals. I can't claim this. His footwork was immense. His shooting style was immense. People say to me, oh, he didn't shoot the three. He didn't have to. He was so good at mid-range jumpers and getting to the rim, and also not to mention three-point shooting just wasn't really a factor when he was playing basketball. But I think that his playing style is overlooked so much more now because of the three-point shooting kind of revolution that's going on here. But one thing that also can't be overstated, him and Magic Johnson saved the NBA in the 1980s. They saved the NBA, straight up. There's no other stars in the league then. They were the top ticket in the NBA in the 1980s, and that's why Larry Bird is number 8 on our list. All right, let's get to number 7. At number 7, the greatest champion in basketball and maybe even sports history in general, it is Bill Russell. Now, we have Bill Russell a little bit farther down. Now, I think this has a lot to do, personally, why we moved him down. Offensively, he was never really a true force in the NBA, despite the amount of players, the quality of players that he went up with. Now, credit, he's probably maybe the most dominant defensive force in the history of basketball in terms of his ability to rebound and block shots. But unfortunately, they did not keep stats on blocks when Bill Russell played. So we'll never actually know how many blocks he had throughout his career, and it's probably going to lead the NBA all time if we ever find out that number. But look, Wilt was fantastic. We know Wilt Chamberlain, but if you need to know something about how amazing Bill Russell was, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell met each other in the playoffs 8 times. Bill Russell won 7 of those series. And we're talking about Wilt Chamberlain, maybe the greatest offensive player in the history of basketball. Bill Russell beat him multiple times in the playoffs. Wilt Chamberlain's overall NBA record against Bill Russell is 58-84 all time. I also think that Bill Russell's impact on the NBA as a black athlete needs to be stated because he was really the first black player to achieve superstar status in the NBA. And that's saying something considering he played for the Boston Celtics his entire NBA career. And if you know this Boston in the 50s and 60s, that was not a time of good relations, especially in terms of civil rights. He's done a lot of great things with the civil rights movement throughout the 60s and 70s and even to this day. And also, not to mention, the NBA Finals Award, or the NBA Finals MVP Award, is named after Bill Russell. So whenever you're trying to look at the greatness of NBA players, Bill Russell better be in your top 10. All right, let's go to number 6. At number 6, just the quiet yet just consistent dominance of Tim Duncan cannot be overstated. 5 championships between 1999 and 2014, 2 NBA MVPs. He was final MVP 3 times, a 15-time All-Star, a 10-time All-NBA first-teamer. I think people give Greg Popovich a lot of credit for what he's been able to do in the NBA. And obviously he is. He's one of the top 5 coaches in the history of basketball, but he built around Tim Duncan. Like, that can't be forgotten. He built around Tim Duncan. The reason he was able to have so many playoff runs and the reason why his teams were able to do so well was because Tim Duncan was such a force down low. And it wasn't exciting. He didn't dunk over people all the time. He wasn't a three-point shooter at all. He was a low-post player who loved to bank in shots off the glass and just straight up dominated people. He is, without a question, the best power forward in the history of basketball. There isn't a power forward that's better than him. The only argument you might be able to make is maybe Hakeem Olajuwon if you consider him a power forward, but I think he's a center. And then maybe Dirk, but I think Tim Duncan has him beat in almost every single category. So I don't think we'll ever see another superstar like Tim Duncan in NBA history, which one of the reasons why he's such a unique player. But I love Tim Duncan. I think what he's been able to do with the NBA and the how do I put this? The attitude that he showed set a standard for what NBA superstars not necessarily should act like, but what they should aspire to be. I think Tim Duncan being that kind of player really did a lot for stars in the NBA. All right, let's get to number 5. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the most unstoppable shot in the history of basketball, the skyhook. No one can stop the skyhook. It was just impossible. He still, to this day, is the all-time leading scorer in the NBA, 38,387 points. You can make an easy argument that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar should be the number 1 player on this list. First player in NBA history to play 20 years in the NBA. He won 6 NBA titles. He won 2 Finals MVPs. He was a 19-time All-Star. He won 6 NBA MVPs, a 10-time All-NBA first-teamer. Look, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar will go down as one of the great all-around players in basketball. His abilities on defense were special as well. His ability to block shots and rebound was always so fun to watch. And just, again, if you ever want to just watch something incredible, just watch the Kareem skyhook on loop. It's really unlike anything you'll see. All right, let's get to number 4. It's Wilt Chamberlain. Now, whether or not you believe in Wilt Chamberlain as a person and maybe the amount of championships he won, his offensive dominance and his statistical output is unreal. A 100-point game. He averaged over 40 points per game in his career multiple times. One year he led the NBA in assists because, as he said, he just felt like leading the NBA in assists, so he did it. It's just incredible what Wilt Chamberlain was able to do in the NBA. Now, again, like I said, he did struggle against Bill Russell, but that was also with Red Auerbach, one of the greatest coaches in the history of basketball, which Wilt Chamberlain was never really blessed with until he went to the Lakers and got to play with the likes of Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. I think the lack of championships does hurt Wilt Chamberlain's overall kind of ability to be number 1 on this list, but this might be the most unstoppable offensive player in the history of basketball. Obviously, the time that he played might throw some shade on this, but look, this is Wilt Chamberlain. He's the only player ever to score 100 points in a game. He has to be in the top 5, and we have him here at number 4. All right, let's get to number 3. It is a shame how the end of his career happened, but Magic Johnson is number 3 on our list. Just one of the most versatile players in NBA history. We have him listed as a point guard, but I don't really think he is a true point guard. He was everything. He was a point guard. He could play the 2. He could play the 3. He could play the 4. He famously played center when Kareem was hurt against the Celtics in the finals, and they won, putting up one of the best games that we've ever seen from a not center playing center. He scored 40 points in that game. It was a special, special game. Probably one of the best individual games in NBA history, but Magic Johnson became the face of the NBA almost the second that he got drafted by the Lakers. Obviously coming out of Michigan State, his rivalry with Larry Bird in the NCAA transmitted over to the NBA. And I mentioned this with Bird. Magic versus Bird defined the NBA and saved it in the 1980s. And also, obviously, Magic Johnson's Showtime Lakers changed what pace in basketball is forever. But obviously, his battle with HIV forced an early retirement in 1991 before he returned for a year, a couple years later. But once he had the HIV, his career was pretty much over. Obviously, his moment during the NBA All-Star Game in '91 was a very special moment. All right, let's move on to number 2. It's LeBron James. No, ladies and gentlemen, he is not the number 1 player of all time yet. I regret to inform you, I just can't quite put him there. Only 3 championships. He's 3-5 in NBA Finals. He'll probably gonna end up with more MVPs than he does now. He's only at 4. He should have 5 after this year, but triple doubles. Look, LeBron James' greatness at this point cannot be argued. One of the greatest players to have ever touched a basketball. He's the defining player of the modern day era. He also, mind you, has the best individual finals win of any person on this list by beating the Warriors in 2016 after being down 3-1. Now, with that, he also does probably have the worst individual finals loss of any player on this list as well, with that loss to the Dallas Mavericks when he was on the Miami Heat. So, long way to go for LeBron James. He's only 33 years old, so we'll see what happens with him as his career goes on. But as of right now, not quite number 1 in my book. And that means there's only one person who can be left to be our number 1 player. It's Kevin McHale. No, just kidding. It is Michael Jordan, the GOAT, still the player that a lot of people associate basketball with in general. Just not even one of the most impactful players in the history of basketball, one of the most impactful people in the history of sports. Dominated the NBA for almost the entire time that he was there. The only reason he didn't win more championships in the first couple years of his career was because he was doing it alone, and the Bulls teams that he was on were pretty bad. Once he got Scottie Pippen and he finally had a number 2, it was unlike anything that we've ever seen in sports. 6 championships, 3 three-peats, a 6-time finals MVP, 5 MVPs by himself, arguably the most dominant player in NBA history. The only thing that stopped him was having to retire for nearly 2 seasons in 1993 at the peak of his career. Again, like I said, the impact that he's had on basketball remains the greatest of any single player. He's the GOAT. It's Michael Jordan. Sorry, LeBron fans. So we're going to go through our top 10 NBA players one more time. Kobe, Shaq, Larry Bird, Bill Russell, and Tim Duncan, 6 through 10. And then our top 5, we have, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Wilt Chamberlain, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But that's going to do it for me today. Remember to follow me on Twitter at SportsTeam for all your sports news and updates. Cam will be back here on Monday to break down what is going on across the NBA in the NFL. But for now, we'll see ya.